Welcome to Value Through Vulnerability, a podcast dedicated to putting the human back into humanity. This afternoon, I am very grateful to welcome Raj Sisodia onto the podcast. Hi there, Raj.
Hi, Gary. How are you?
I am very well, thank you very much. How about yourself?
Great. Yeah, enjoying the beautiful morning here in Boston.
Fantastic. Well, just before we came on, you gave me an education about a certain team that you're happy about as of yesterday.
Yes, this is the baseball playoff season right now, and the Red Sox had an epic win last night. So it was incredibly exciting, and my daughter was here to watch with me, so that's always fun. Yeah.
Lovely.
It's amazing how things that really don't matter ultimately matter a lot at some level, you know. So, yeah.
We can stop the podcast there, Raj, at the end.
And vice versa, you could say, right? Yeah. So, yeah, no, it was great. So I'm a little sleep deprived because I was up till about 2 a.m. I think.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, we'll do our best to give you some questions to keep you awake, Raj. So would you mind, for any listeners that may not know who you are, just give a bit of a background as to your sort of field of work and what you're passionate about, Raj?
Yes, so I'm a business professor, have been for the last 33 years, teaching in the US, got my PhD here at Columbia University in 1985 or so. And my field was marketing. That's what I got my PhD in. But over the years, I had a lot of questions about marketing and some frustrations with it and the way it's done and how much money is spent and the consequences of the way in which we market on people and on society broadly. And so a lot of my work was looking at what doesn't work very well and what we need to do to improve it. And that eventually led me, by asking these kinds of questions, to search for a better way of thinking about marketing and more broadly thinking about business. So that was a journey that started around 2004 or so when I started a book, which eventually became Firms of Endearment, How World-Class Companies Profit from Passion and Purpose, which came out in 2007. But that really uncovered for me a new paradigm of business, which had been there, but people hadn't really identified it or labeled it as such. So there's a dominant story of business. It's all about profits. It's all about shareholder value. It's about using people to achieve those goals. And this was another way of being, which is about actually caring for and serving all of your stakeholders and having a reason for being that goes beyond profit. And by doing that and having leaders who are driven by those things, they actually create far more successful enterprises, broadly defined, not just defined narrowly as money, but as having a positive impact on human flourishing. So these companies outperform financially, but they also do dramatically better things for their employees, the families of their employees, communities, the environment, customers, suppliers, etc. So it's kind of a win-win all around. So it's a way of doing business that everybody matters and everybody wins. And that seemed to me something worthy of dedicating the rest of my life to, which is what I've done since that time. We started the Conscious Capitalism movement, which basically takes those ideas that we uncovered in Firms of Endearment, and then along with some of the practitioners of that way of being, like John Mackey of Whole Foods, and Doug Rao of Trader Joe's, and Kip Tindall of the Container Store, and people from Southwest Airlines and Costco and others. We said, here's a different template. You don't have to follow that old, tired, harmful way of doing business. There's another way. I say it's rooted in love and care. It's not just about self-interest. See, human beings are not just driven by self-interest. We are equally, if not more powerfully, motivated by our need to care, and our capacity for caring is vast. And all of that is left out or has been left out of the world of business. So we started this movement, Conscious Capitalism, about 10 years ago. And now it's grown quite a bit. We have chapters all over the world, like 17 or 18 countries, and about 37 US cities where we have a presence. So it's been a really gratifying and I would say soul-satisfying journey to be part of the world of business, but in this way, rather than in the extractive sort of treating people as a means to other ends. That's the mentality of business by and large. So that's what my background has been, and now we're continuing on that journey and going deeper and trying to see, there's no limit to consciousness. And hence, there's really no limit to conscious capitalism. You can't say I've arrived, that I've achieved, enlightenment. I mean, there's always more we can do. There's always a better way. It doesn't matter how good your current way is. So that's the exciting journey. And we just keep pushing the frontiers of this.
Wow, that's so powerful. Can I just pick up on that? I love you describing working towards sort of freeing, almost to some extent, the human flourishing. It's such a wonderful term, Raj. Would you mind sort of expanding on that a little bit? Where did that come from? Is that your term? Is it something that's evolved sort of organically with the movement?
We talk about higher purpose as one of our 4 tenets. And so therefore, for conscious capitalism, what is our higher purpose? It is to elevate humanity through business, right? So elevating humanity is basically promoting human flourishing. And it is flourishing. It's not just, the economic view of maximizing income and so forth. It's promoting overall flourishing. And of course, even though we don't have the words in there, but recognizes that human beings cannot flourish unless the planet flourishes and unless all life flourishes and unless we recognize the interconnectedness and interdependence of all things on this planet. And that's one of the big things that business hasn't done. It's looked at cause and effect. It's really looked at, we want to achieve this, therefore we do this. One of the impact of that, if you zoom out, are generally negative. We tend to focus on what we call the main effects. The main effect is making money. That's what and everything else is seen as a side effect. Well, as we say, there's no such thing called a side effect. We do things and there are effects. And all the effects matter. In fact, some of those so-called side effects might be more ultimately impactful than your so-called main effects. So we need to do business with a spectrum of positive effects, which means creating social, cultural, economic, emotional, spiritual, ecological, physical well-being. We talk about 8 kinds of wealth that businesses can either create or destroy. And we need to do all of those. And it's not a trade-off. A big part of this is getting rid of trade-off thinking. That that everything is a compromise. If you want more of this, you got to push, have less of this. No, there is no win without a win-win. Is the mentality going in, and it's incredible that when you give people that challenge and that constraint, human creativity is essentially infinite. It's the one unlimited thing on this planet is human creativity. And yet, for most of us, we never fully engage in that because that only gets switched on when we are driven by a purpose, when we feel cared for and safe, right? When we create the conditions in which that can happen. Most businesses don't create those conditions at all. People are seen as objects, you told to do the job. So the vast majority of what we're capable of is never actually comes to the surface. To say most people have been born and they live and they die with their music still inside them. Because we never create the conditions. We say it's the seed and the soil. The seed is incredibly potent. The human seed has become even more potent over time. We are more intelligent today than ever before. We're more conscious, we're more caring, we're more, integrated in some ways, in terms of masculine, feminine, and other things. But the soil remains toxic, and the soil is what we create in organizations. It's the culture, it's the values, it's the unspoken things. And so we need to, and that's what we're doing to our planet, right? We're destroying the soil. And that's what's leading to life, withering away from it. So that's the same thing in organizations consist of organisms. And we have made them these disembodied, dehumanized, mechanized entities. Or even worse, we treat business like a form of war. Right? War is business is like battle, and customers are the prize, and employees are these soldiers, and competitors are the bitter enemies to be vanquished. I mean, there's a lot of that, and that's actually, it's kind of a natural outcome of the way in which capitalism evolved. We look to the military because we didn't have any large organizations to learn from. So armies were the only large organizations that existed. So we borrowed the command and control and the hierarchy and the language of strategy and tactics and operations and front lines. All of that comes from the military. And with that comes a mindset. That is inherently a lose-lose mindset. Even though a war that you win, ultimately you've lost. Because The best war is the one you avoid, and every war plants the seeds for the next ones. So business is a win-win game if you do it right. So that's where we need different ways of thinking. We essentially need a new operating system or a new philosophy, a new philosophical foundation for capitalism and business, which goes way beyond what we had. I mean, Adam Smith was brilliant. He gave us one of history's great, beautiful insights, which is freedom leads to prosperity. Right? And these are two things human beings value greatly, and they're connected. So that's beautiful. So we built our system based on the idea of people pursuing their self-interest, right? Rooted in their own free will. But we left out the other side, which was a human need to care, which was also Adam Smith, the theory of moral sentiments, right? Which he wrote 17 years prior, which was about that. And we left that out. So I like to say capitalism had a mother and a father, and they were both embodied in Adam Smith. Right? You have the father energy of self-interest and the mother energy of caring, but we ignored the mother energy, as we tend to do. We humans tend to take our mothers for granted, right? And that's the most important thing. So I think we're moving towards wholeness, which is why I'm now obsessed with healing, because healing, the definition of healing is to become whole. And we haven't been whole as human beings, most of us. We're fragmented internally. And our societal systems have not been whole because they've operated on a limited understanding of what human beings are about, right? Most of them are rooted in this idea of self-interest or economic rational, value maximization, etc. That's not the totality of what is a human being. So I think moving towards wholeness, which would then heal us. If we become whole, we would become healed. And that's, I think, what we're trying to bring in here is the idea of wholeness, because we've really, at best, we've reflected 1/4 of what it means to be a human being. And I would say even 1/8, perhaps. And this is about the rest of it, the missing pieces. We've been sort of dismembered. We need to remember. Right? So anyway, I forgot what your question was, but that's my answer.
It's beautiful. No, you're touching on a number of the things I wanted to touch on. What I'm really interested in, Raj, if you've explained all that for me. So we're really talking here about almost the sort of the work system, how do people operate, how are they led, etc. If you go back towards the education system, do you feel that the education system is, I know it changes around the world, but is that doing what we need for the next generation of leaders around wholeness and inclusion and sort of,
No, absolutely not. Our education system is a huge barrier to our evolution in this way. And that includes all the way from primary through graduate school. I mean, in business. And business schools, to me, are a huge barrier to positive change in business. Because we are wedded to our theories, and these are treated as gospel. And agency theory and shareholder maximization and Milton Friedman, I mean, these are the deities. And, most business faculty don't question that. And we teach that to idealistic young people, who come, some of whom come to business school, wanting to change the world, and then they're drawn into this paradigm of, I was reading somewhere that there's a guy who does a lot of work with mushrooms in the US, and that's a massive area in itself, and there's enormous potential for all kinds of benefits from that. And because of his work, a lot of young students have now been drawn to universities, to graduate school, to focus on doing research in that area. So they go there wanting to save the world, and the professors want them to study yeast, work on yeast. Spend 4 years digging into one tiny thing. So that's, I think, business schools are part of the problem. So I would say our education system definitely, as many people say, it was rooted in the industrial age, and it was basically trying to create assembly line workers and so forth. It's basically giving people a set of information that nowadays you can get. But it's not teaching people, we're not giving wisdom. We're not teaching people how to live. We need a school of life in a way to understand what matters and what doesn't matter and so forth. I mean, so I think, there's this huge need for change in our education systems generally. And Sir Ken Robinson has some wonderful talks about that. He was actually the MC of our first Conscious Capitalism main conference.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. No, I've got to say, he shifted my thinking when I first saw his first TED Talk was, really quite mind-blowing around how skills, how schools kill creativity. And I know there is some good work going on, I look around, you look at things like with Ricardo Semler in Brazil and how he's sort of tried to change how education operates, but it's still, we still seem to be a bit addicted, don't we, to going back
yeah,
to
there's a long way. Right. Yeah.
In terms of, so if you come back up to speed with regard, so I really enjoyed your TED talk where you were talking about the healing organization. I've not seen a book as yet, Raj, to that name come out. Is that on its way?
No, book is, we're writing as we speak.
Okay.
So I'm going. So the book deadline is February 7th. It was due this month actually.
Okay.
To the publisher, but then I decided, over the summer and over the last 6-7 months, that if I'm going to write a book about healing, I really need to learn more about healing. I need to experience healing, myself. I think all of us need to heal. There's hardly any of us who are fully healed in that sense. So I just felt the need to slow down on the book and go through some experiences, including a silent retreat, a retreat in the Himalayas, including a trip into the rainforest in Ecuador, and a variety of other things. And it really has been beneficial. This book to us is a sacred undertaking because it is speaking to, you talk about vulnerability, speaking to deep pain that's out there. And everybody feels the need for healing at every level, individual all the way to societal and planetary. And therefore, we want to do justice to that theme to the extent we're capable of it. So we don't want to rush it. And as you say, you can't write what you don't know. You can't teach what you haven't experienced. So I think that's in that spirit, we delayed it a little bit. So it's going to be now submitted by February 7th. And should come out roughly a year from now.
Okay.
So still a ways to go. But it's been the most incredibly moving and inspiring experience to work on it. We are literally moved to tears just writing these stories. So it's just that to me is always a test of the power of any ideas. Does it engage you emotionally and spiritually, not just intellectually? And that happened with Forms of Endearment when I wrote that 12 years ago. And it's happening with this book. There's just a deep emotional resonance with it. And I think that tells you something. When your body when you have a physical response to a thought or an idea, there's power there that we need to pay attention to. So yeah, it'll come out in about a year. We have some amazing stories in that book.
It's amazing, as I say, just for any listeners that are listening. So, I'm really grateful for you to join me today, Raj, because, I was moved physically by listening to you talking to Bob Chapman on one of the Barry Waymiller podcasts. And yeah, I don't think these conversations are happening enough where we just genuinely just settle into a place of vulnerability just to go, look, how are you feeling? What's going on for you? What does it mean? We're just so busy. And I'm just wondering, what was your aim of your book? What was the ultimate sort of goal for you with the healing organization? What would be a success? What would that look like for you of this book?
Well, James Baldwin, the great African-American writer, said, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. And I think we need to, in the world of business, face up to the fact that the way in which we run businesses, the way we lead, the way we operate, organize, is causing an extraordinary amount of suffering. And until we acknowledge that and see that, right? There's a Buddhist thing about starting with not knowing and then bearing witness, right? And then taking action, right? So we want to start by making people aware, that underneath the surface, you've got people that are suffering deeply. They're suffering because life is tough anyway. They're suffering because financially, at least half of Americans are deeply stressed to the point of being on the edge of disaster, financial disaster. 50% of Americans have less than $400 in the bank, for example. It's a rich country and a booming economy right now, low unemployment. And yet 60% of households are technically insolvent, right? So there's enormous financial stress, which then leads to other kinds of stress, physical stress. People are dealing with life challenges, whether it's elderly parents or special needs kids or whatever. And then the work makes it worse. Incredible amounts of stress. right? Dehumanization. Heart attacks are 20% higher on Monday morning, right? 120,000 extra deaths a year in the US alone of employees are attributed to the way in which we work. Employee engagement is only 15% worldwide. 88% of Americans feel they work for a company that doesn't care about them as a human being, right? So it's all there. All the evidence is in our face. We can choose to see it or not see it. As they say, you will see it when you believe it. So part of it is creating awareness. You talk about awareness as one of your words, right? And inclusion, we talk about that as well. Because most companies operate with kind of a caste system, like we have in India. There's a caste system of sort of the managerial side of the house and all the people with the degrees and the full-time jobs and the benefits and all of that. And even they're suffering. It's not like they're having a joyride. There's a lot of pain there too. But on the other side, you've got the people with hourly jobs, with no job security, with no benefits, with no health care, with very low pay, with no respect, with no dignity, with no forgiveness, no understanding, nothing. I mean, life for them is hellish, and it gets worse when they get to work. And so there's an incredible amount of suffering. So we want to create an awareness that there is a lot of suffering. But at the same time, we want to inspire people with stories of companies that have taken people. So most companies, they take people who are relatively whole and healthy. When they start, over time, they get burned out, stressed out. They get chronic conditions, and all of these things happen to them. And there are businesses that do the opposite. They take people who have actually been burned out, stressed out, and been through they're in a post-traumatic stress disorder kind of state, and turn their lives around. And not only their lives, the lives of their children, their families, and their communities. Barry Waymiller and Bob Chapman are a good example of that. I think the seeds of this idea got planted when I wrote that book with Bob called Everybody Matters, because they were indeed taking companies that were dying and struggling, whose people had been laid off many times and were operating with zero security and tremendous strain and stress in their lives, and acquiring now about 105 companies at last count and turning them all around, never selling a single one. Same people, same business, same location. What was struggling and dying is now thriving. People who were in this PTSD state are now thriving, flourishing, and their children and families are. So he turned the lives of these people and these towns and these businesses around. And he's going to buy another 10, 15 companies this year. And I said, well, why are you doing that? You don't need the money and you don't need the aggravation. And he's 74, you got, what does he have? 26 grandchildren, I think. I said, you should be enjoying. He said, I don't know how much time I have left. And on my deathbed, I will not be proud of the machines we built or the money we made, but the lives that we touched. And I want to touch as many lives as I can before I die. And that's what they say, we measure success by the way we touch the lives of people. That's their bottom line. So I said to him, Bob, you're not growing a business, you're spreading a ministry. This is a ministry. So I use that language in Everybody Matters, and ultimately that led to this idea of business as healing. Because if you have a healing business, the more you grow, the better the world gets, right? But that's not how most businesses grow. Most businesses are extractive and they're maximizing profits, which means squeezing people and squeezing suppliers and squeezing communities. And the more they grow, the worse the world gets. They spread suffering as they grow. It's like growing an empire versus spreading a ministry. If you look at empires in human history, they've grown through conquest, through war, through killing, through devastation, through ruin, all to satisfy the ego of a leader who wants to be known as great. Alexander the Great. What is that greatness? If it's not rooted in goodness, what is greatness? It's just great harm, right? And great suffering. And so, again, I've forgotten the question, but that was kind of the journey. So it came, one was that dimension, an example, and vulnerability. When I went there for the first time, even before I decided whether I was going to do the book, and I just sat with a room full of middle-aged blue-collar men in their 50s and 60s, mostly with high school or less education, in rural Wisconsin. This is about as middle America as you can get, right? And I simply asked one question. I said, tell me how it used to be and how it changed. when you became part of Barry Wagner, got acquired. And before they could even speak, many of them were all choked up. And some literally had tears on their face. I said, wow, that alone tells me a lot. You know, if you can get middle-aged blue-collar men in industrial Midwest America to cry in front of each other, there's something powerful happening here, you know, which I've never seen before. So that was, you know, it showed me again vulnerability. They joke at Barry Wagner that they said, we measure our success in man tears. You know?
I love that.
in the leadership development programs, whatever it is, you know, emotions, allowing people to express that in an encouraging direction. So that was one, and the other thing was this feminine masculine split, and the suppression of the feminine. That's something I've been talking about for years, and then I ended up writing a book about that, integrating the masculine and feminine together, and that's called Shakti Leadership. So that's another kind of wholeness, right? Which is that masculine feminine split within us, and most of us, we all have both sides, but the feminine is suppressed and repressed in the world and society generally, and certainly women are subjugated and sidelined and so forth. But that's really been the big missing piece, right? Because humanity has these two wings, but one wing has been tied up. And how far can you go on one wing? You know, you go around in circles, right? And there's a lot of violence and so forth that happens. So it's about becoming whole in that dimension. That's the caring side. The feminine is, right, the caring side of human beings, the nurturing, compassionate, all of those things. That's what's been missing, and hence we've caused all this suffering, because we have become hyper masculine, right? Everything is war, and everything goes in a war, right? It's all. So yeah, those are the sort of streams that led me to this idea of healing as a meta purpose of business. And I'd already been using it as an acronym for the qualities of a great purpose. Like I have an acronym for everything. Okay. So this was the acronym for purpose. I said purpose is heroic, evolving, aligning, loving, inspiring, natural, and galvanizing. That adds up to healing, right? But then as I thought about it, I said, no, it's not just an acronym. It actually is, it's the key word that describes, at some level, every purpose needs to be a healing purpose. Because what is business? Business is a way to meet people's needs, right? It's a mechanism that we've evolved in a free society, that we get to sense and respond to each other's needs. As customers, as employees, you know, as community, and all the needs, right? So employees have needs, we meet those needs. Customers have. So if we come at it from the energy of meeting people's needs, which means we are serving them, and taking care of them in that dimension, right? Then you are healing them. You know, when you meet somebody's real needs, you are actually making them whole in that dimension. And that is inherently a healing act. If you're hungry and I bring you food, that's a healing act, right? If you're tired, I give you shelter or a bed, that's a healing act. You know, whatever be your need. So if that's the energy that drives you, then your business is a healing business. But if you come at it purely from self-interest, which is to say, how can I view you as a customer and get your money, right? Or employee, how can I pay you as little and get you to work as much? You know, then you're starting, it's about using and exploiting rather than serving and creating value for. So I think when we lead, so we need both elements, right? If you only have caring without the self-interest, then we won't have a sustainable business, because it won't be able to rely on donations, run out of money at some point. We need both, but we need to lead with the caring side. Right now we're leading with the self-interest and we're grudgingly caring. We have to, you know, we have to take better care of our customers, you know, because they hate us. Okay. Right? As opposed to saying, no, we say we're going to capture market share. I said, no, you're going to serve customers. You're not going to capture market share. You're going to serve customers better. Right? That kind of energy. So what energy do we lead with? I think that's, to me, that's the more human side of human beings, is the caring side. And that's what we need to lead with. And then we need to make sure that we are doing enough to sustain the business financially and otherwise. And as it turns out, you know, with all these things, it's another, like freedom leading to prosperity, another beautiful positive irony is that caring businesses are thriving businesses, right? Endearing companies are enduring companies. These kinds of businesses succeed better because everybody wants them to thrive. Everybody loves them, right? People aren't plotting, how can I take advantage of this company? They're trying to figure out. A great example, when Whole Foods, one of our sort of core companies, they had a flood 1 year after they were founded in Austin, and they're a for-profit company, right? So, but they were deeply loved by their employees and their customers and their communities. They stood for something, and they were very successful. But they had a flood that destroyed everything, including the store, the cash registers, the refrigeration equipment, all the inventory. They had no warehouse, they had no savings, they had no balance in the bank. So they were basically out of business. They were $400,000 in the red that morning because everything was destroyed. And there was no way to recover from this. And yet people showed up, and customers showed up, and people who lived in the community showed up, and others showed up, and they got to work cleaning up the store. And they just said, we're not going to let you die. We'll do what we can. People had bake sales, and they had music concerts to raise money for a for-profit company, right? So that's the power of business. When you do it in this way, the love just gets reciprocated. It's the most powerful thing. That's what allowed that company to actually survive. And today it's 100,000 employees, $15 billion. It has had a huge impact on the culture. So,
Cool.
Yeah, that's where the healing thing is coming from.
It's so powerful, and it's quite a challenge for me as well, Raj, because I actually work in the oil and gas industry, and it's probably for the last 6 months. Yeah. But it's really, so I've been on quite personally a spiritual journey myself, sort of understanding how mind consciousness thought actually implies our human experience quite recently. And I'm really questioning, honestly, and listening to you talk, we operate very much in a scarcity environment. It comes out of the ground, there's a scarce amount of it. And it is very much that war-like approach to actually, you've got a product someone needs, you can push the price up because you can get away with it. It's a very different approach, and I'm really wrestling with it, Raj, to be honest. Really wrestling with it.
Yeah. No, I agree. That's the energy that pervades. It's because the hyper masculine is very short term. It's very win lose at best, right? Yeah, I agree. But in every industry, there's that's about energy and power, and there's better ways to do those things. Over time, we will evolve in that direction.
Could I come back to you on you spoke about the sort of feminine and masculine side, and we need both wings, which I think absolutely is the case. How important for you is language as part of this conversation? Because I wrote a blog quite recently actually around soft skills. Still seems to be a second-hand term in sort of masculine-led environment. Is language an important thing, do you think, for this movement as well?
Yeah, language is a bit of a challenge because there are very few men who like to be told either that they have a feminine side that or that they need to cultivate it. It's almost seen as an insult to them. Because men have this very fragile ego about these things. And in our culture, we make fun, right, of men who are caring and so forth, right? I mean, all these words like sissy and so forth. And likewise for women, to be called masculine. So I think, yes, we need better language, whether it's relational or transactional. I don't know if that's a language. So sometimes language can get in the way. But we should not let that be a barrier. We should need to be able to look past that and recognize the truth of it, right? We all come from mothers. We all have the capacity for caring. We all have feelings, emotions. We systematically, in a patriarchal society, shut those things down. Little boys are told, don't cry, be a man, even if they're feeling deep pain about something, right? So and that becomes incredibly unhealthy, creates this inner child wounding of the inner child, and that shows up later as violence and aggression. Right? It's very, very unhealthy. So yes, I agree, languaging can be a challenge, especially for men. But so maybe I'm thinking the father energy and the mother energy, but even that's a challenge because men don't want to say that I need to show some more mother energy. The phrase that we use now is that as a leader, you need to be the wise fool of tough love. Okay, so you need to be wise, which is your higher self, foolish, which is your child self, and then tough, masculine, and love, feminine. So you've got all four of those elements. Because that's the other aspect of wholeness, is that we need to reconnect with the inner child, and that innocence and joy. Without that, you don't have creativity, and you don't have, you don't enjoy life if you don't have that inner child. Well, most of us have a wounded inner child. We don't have a healthy inner child. And then the higher self, which is our wise elder parent side. So we need to cultivate all four of those qualities, right? And then become whole by cultivating all four, recognizing what is your default, what is overdeveloped in you, and then working on the other complementary pieces of it. And that can be done. That's why in our book Shakti Leadership, we have approaches or methods to do that. And then once you're whole, then you need to have the discernment to know what's called for in a given situation. Some situations call for toughness or love or foolishness or wisdom. And then the flexibility to be able to show up in that way, in that situation, while remaining authentic. It's not like you're acting and being somebody you're not, because now you are all those things, right? But you can now, bring out that side. That's what's needed. So I think again that's wholeness, and operating from a place of wholeness. So healing yourself. Until we heal ourselves as a leader, as a person, doing anything, we cannot bring healing in the world until we have healed internally ourselves. Right. So a leader who is fragmented and wounded inside, like the one we have right now in the US, is going to bring enormous suffering to others, because they're not capable of doing anything else, because they have these unresolved things within them.
And is part of that for you, Raj, around that lack of, just as in theme with this podcast, the lack of that person to be vulnerable to say, hey, I've got something going on, I'm going to deal with it, and then I can be a better version of myself afterwards? Is that part of it? That part of it, do you think? Or?
Oh, it is, yeah. So that's the awareness, right? That's the self-knowing. So you have to know yourself, right, as a starting point. And then, realize what you need to do to become whole. And then once you do that, then love yourself, right? So you have to start. Otherwise, if you don't do those things, they're going to cause suffering in others. That's what we see. All of the dictators and all of the people who have been responsible for all the suffering in the world, whether it's Hitler or Stalin, and people, they had all this inner wounding within them, right? And we have systems that allow such people to rise to incredible heights of power. Power and virtue need to go together. But in our societal and political systems, as well as in our business systems, we've created conditions that are hostile to virtue elevating into power, right? So the most Machiavellian and power-hungry people seek and attain power. And the people who are virtuous do not seek power, but those are the ones who we need to empower. That's a challenge, I think, at a business level as well as societal level. How do we reconcile this thing that people who would do the most good with power don't seek out power? Right? We have exceptions, of course, whether it's Gandhi or Mandela or King, etc. They have the moral power. That should be the foundation of power. So, yeah.
A little bit of a left field question, if I may, Raj, because as I'm listening to talk about wholeness, so the strengths-based approach within leadership, if I may ask the question. So I still wrangle myself a little bit between this idea of focusing on your strengths and to some extent just recruiting to cover your weaknesses.
Yeah.
What's your take? What's your take on that?
Well, I would say yes. You cannot be outstanding at all things, and at a broad level, what I just described as wholeness. I think those you can all of us can do, right? Because those, I think, are essential elements for all of us. We need to have wisdom that in all four of us. We need to end this split within. Now, beyond that, each of us has certain things that characterize our nature. Your nature is to be a certain way. A bird is a certain way and a horse is a certain way. Right? You've got a certain nature to you. You can't expect a bird to do what a horse does and vice versa. But be a whole bird and be a whole horse. And then, you can then, as you said, complement what your essential qualities are in the team with others. But you need to be authentic in terms of who you are, right? So know yourself, become whole, love yourself, but then be yourself and express yourself as a leader, as a human being. So the qualities that are most inherent to you need to be projected into the world, while recognizing that there are other things that are also needed. So you might be incredibly creative and so forth. We need somebody who's also very detail-oriented and who can do the execution, right? Who can implement. So they call it the idea monkeys and the ringmasters. I mean, you need both, right? So and that's why a lot of great companies have co-founders. They have two people who bring that complementarity. But I think so that's important. But I think at the same time, you cannot look to others to complete you. You need to be complete in yourself. Even in relationships, right? We have this idea that you complete me. Right? So 1 + 1 = 1, then that's somebody got lost. Right? So you need to be a whole person connecting to another whole person. And a team of whole people, rather than a team of fragmented people that somehow add up to. Because when you have a team of whole people, it's going to add up to more than the sum of its parts. When you have a team of fragmented people, it's going to add up to less than the sum of its parts. So there are 6 people operating as 3 people, rather than as 9 people, I suppose.
Fantastic. Who or what right now, Raj, you could only pick one thing, who or what is inspiring you the most right now?
I would say it's the leaders that we are talking to and the companies and the way in which they are creating healing. It's incredible. I mean, it's people like N.K. Chaudhary, who runs Jaipur Rugs out of Jaipur, India, and has transformed that industry and the lives of 40,000 women weavers who are considered untouchable and who are illiterate and abused, and they've got horrible lives. And he is dedicated to serving them. He said they are the innocents in the world. We need to serve the innocents. They are being exploited, and abused by everybody. Their husbands, their in-laws, even their own families, contractors, everybody is abusing them. He's there to elevate them. So I would say right now it's all the leaders that we are learning from, that we are writing about. Bernie Glassman, who started Greyston Bakery in Yonkers, New York, because Greyston had the highest concentration of homeless people in the country. It's also located in one of the wealthiest counties in the country. So how do we solve this problem? And he started a business. And in that business, most of the homeless people have either some kind of a mental health issue or they have some kind of a criminal history. The US is a country that has an extremely harsh criminal justice system and incarcerates a higher percentage of its population than any other country by far in the world. More than North Korea, more than China, Cuba, or any other country you want to identify. And so there are 70 million Americans with some kind of a prison record or criminal record. 70 million out of 330. The same number that have a college degree have some kind of criminal record, and therefore they get shut out from most jobs. So Bernie Glassman said, I want to give people a first chance. They never even got a first chance. They grew up in ghettos surrounded by drugs and crime, terrible schools. So he's created this company that they make brownies and they sell them to Ben and Jerry's and Whole Foods. And he said, we don't hire people to bake brownies. We bake brownies to hire people. So they practice open hiring. And if you need a job, put your name on the list. They hire the next person without background checks, without interviews. They train them get them a job. They help them with housing, they help them with childcare, they help them with all the things that you need to get on your feet and get going in life. So, and again, these are for-profit businesses. These are all, these are not non-profits. So yeah, that's what I'm inspired by right now. What's possible, the incredible power and beauty of business to elevate in people's lives. One of these weavers I talked to for an hour in Jaipur in July, Shanti, illiterate woman, 6 children, the whole story abused by her in-law, her husband is alcoholic, and contractors would never pay her on time or pay her less, miserable life. Today, 3 of her children are in college. 1 is already graduated. The other 3 are on their way to graduating. She has learned to read and write and do basic accounting and speaks a little bit of English. She's got 11 looms and she's got 25 women working under her. Her life and that of future generations in her family has been completely transformed by this business, right? Not by charity, not by somebody giving a handout, but they have enabled her now to create a life. And she says of Mr. Chaudhary, I said, what do you think about him? She said, well, I don't even know how to describe him. He's more than my mother and father. To me, he's God, because he has given me life. I didn't have a life before this. That's the power of business. That's the power of a leader. And by the way, the word that he uses is innocence. He said, I am an innocent. He said, I have always been in his own nature. So the words that, I love your words, but the 4 words that I'm now bringing in this book are truth, to show people the reality of what business, has impact. Simplicity, love, and innocence. And if we can bring those into business, that would be tremendously healing, because that's what's missing. Those are the energies that are missing.
It's really powerful, because those 4 words for me just describe, Raj, are a nice mix of masculine and feminine in how they come across to some extent.
Yeah, so truth, simplicity. I haven't categorized them that way. So are you putting truth as masculine? Simplicity, I think, love, right? And
innocence. There's just something about how you communicated that to me that just felt a good mix between the 2.
Yeah.
In the moment.
Yeah, I think there's a child thing in there, the innocence, there's the love, we call that feminine. There's the truth, which is masculine. It's also kind of the good, the true, and the beautiful, the platonic ideals, right? The things that we don't have to justify for, by any other means other than these are the worthy things that are worthy pursuits in their own right. So yeah, there's something fundamental to that. And simplicity is beautiful. I mean, true beauty is, right? Yeah.
What if you were going to come across barriers? I could imagine that you operate in a fantastic space around these visionary leaders, these people looking to make a difference bigger than themselves. Raj, do you ever come up against any naysayers? Maybe some people that are just so deeply ingrained in the old ways of working, they just can't see how conscious capitalism could ever be a good thing?
Yeah, yeah, they're out there.
Okay.
Of course. They don't typically show up at our conferences, right? And so we attract. It's like we're waving a magnet out there, and there are people who are sticking to it, and there are others who are not, and that's fine. One of the things I learned from Bob Chapman is courageous patience, and the metaphor they use, they talk about getting the right people on the bus. Right? That's something that Jim Collins, that you've got to get the right people on the bus and in the right seats, right? It's always about the right people. He said, it's not about the right people, it's about having a safe bus and a driver who knows where we're going, right? And everybody gets to get a seat on the bus. And if you don't get on this time, don't worry, the bus will come around again, right? And you will get it when you get it. So yes, there are naysayers out there. There are people who are deeply wedded to the old paradigm. There are people whose whole identity is tied up in that, right? And it would be destroying their own ego to walk away from a worldview that they've had for a long time, and that's fine. you know, if people come to these things in their own way, they have their own awakenings, you know, realizations. Some never will. And that's okay too, you know, that's, everybody has their journey. We do what we can to, so it's a dual metaphor. It's either we're planting, so when I speak 80, 90 times a year all over the world with these things, and many of us in the movement are spreading these words, we're in a way planting seeds, and some of them may take decades to actually germinate. Like there's a famous picture of Death Valley, California. Sir Ken Robinson used actually when he was our MC. Death Valley is a place where everything is dead. There's no plant life, insect life, animal life, nothing, right? So a picture of a particular part of the valley which is completely barren. And then one year some rain fell there. And then suddenly you see the same valley is covered with wildflowers. So there were seeds that were dormant for God knows how long. But when the conditions were present, you know, they flourished. So we are planting seeds and we are sprinkling water. The seeds are already there that we can have germinate. The others, we plant the seed and then something else will cause it to germinate. So that's what we're doing. So yeah, people push back against the idea of healing. You know, they find it, some people find it insulting, you know, to suggest that they're causing suffering. So what do you mean? I'm providing jobs and I'm providing, you know, products, right? So yeah, there's resistance out there, of course. And right now we're going through a period of, I call it the Empire Strikes Back, because it's kind of the Star Wars analogy, right? We've had a Force Awakening. We've had this opening of consciousness in the last three decades, really since 1989, I think, the turning point. And a lot has changed for the better in society in terms of consciousness and women's rights and gay rights and, you know, all lots of things. But at the same time, there is a perceived threat to the established order and the way things were. There's a nostalgia for, you know, the good old 50s, for example, in the US, which was a time of kind of apartheid, segregation and all kinds of abuse and, you know, stuff. But, you know, so there's so you know, a lot of change happens in the Force Awakens and the Empire Strikes Back. I think that's what's happening now with the Brexit and the Trump and the guy in Brazil and the guy in the Philippines and all these men. I think that's that old order. I don't think that will last. And I think eventually you don't stop progress. And you know, progress doesn't happen in a straight line. It kind of goes in a spiral. So there's a period of retrenchment. But then you're off on a second trajectory after that. I think that's going to happen now. You know, women and young people and many others are being awakened in a way that they would not have been awakened had we not gone through what we're going through right now. So ultimately, you know, this could be something that serves us, a necessary step, you know. So we'll see. It's the return of the Jedi, right?
Yeah. I love this, and I'm conscious of time, Raj, so I won't keep you much longer. I'm really intrigued by this last part of the conversation, because if you look at technology, so, you know, technology sort of took us down the Industrial Revolution, bums on seats, you know, people stuck in particular roles for 100 years. Technology now is almost the savior. I feel that it's actually connecting us en masse as human beings to other like-minded or challenging way of thinking. So technology almost took us down a rabbit hole, and now it's taken us back out again, is how I see it. How do you sort of see technology enabling the movement or the expansion of conscious capitalism forward?
Well, technology is a tool, and every tool can be used with different levels of consciousness. So you can use it as a way to imprison people, as a way to use people, as a way to burden, as we did, I think, in the industrial age. In many ways, we created, you know, the assembly line, the repetitive motion work, and all. We took the soul and the spirit and even the mind out of work. Just treated people as a pair of hands. I think the same thing is true today. All the artificial intelligence and everything else. If we come with a consciousness of elevating and serving people and enriching life rather than replacing people, I think that will then lead us down a certain path. You know, all the things that have happened with the web and with connectivity and mobile phones and all of it. Each of those, there's a paradox within it. Right? The web has informed us incredibly, you know, but it has created information overload, and we don't know what's true and what's not. we are connected together with technology incredibly today, but at the same time, we have less human-to-human connection. That's actually a big problem. We are more intelligent than ever. IQ is rising rapidly, but are we gaining in wisdom? Do we have perspective? Are we even teaching that? We're living longer, but are we aging healthily? Right? We have the rise of feminine values, but can that become the hyper feminine? Can that be excluded? Does it mean the end of men? As some, it's not replacing. It's supposed to complement and augment. So it's the consciousness with which we deal with these questions and what we can do with them that will decide the impact. I think. So I think in a world of higher and higher technology, the need for the human side is even greater. So augmenting humanity, I think, is what should be driving development and use of technology. And I think it's happening. I see more of that.
Fantastic. Well, look, Raj, it's been an absolute joy to meet you and speak to you today. So how can people reach out to you? What's the best way if people want to follow your progress with the new book or with Conscious Capitalism?
So there's my website, which is rajsisodia.com. So that has information about me and how to get in touch with me. And then there's consciouscapitalism.org, which is our movement. So you can find out about that, and where there's a chapter, where you live, or if you want to start a chapter, if you want to attend our events. So all of that information is on that website.
Fantastic. Well, look, an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate you spending the time today, Raj. Thank you very much.
Sure, my pleasure. Nice to talk to you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.